doing this for a long time now. Help them start to rebuild.
So May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I think I mentioned in the past that I've worked in mental health as a nurse since 2012, and mental health has a spot in my heart. Definitely, I have a lot of different perspectives on mental health, and just the idea of mental health in all of us is kind of something that I always try to understand more, try to dissect it more, in a way that I could see if I can help, right? If I can help people in any aspect of that. The problem I have with Mental Health Awareness Month or any type of awareness month is I feel like it's good, right, to be aware of something, to be aware of the existence of something, but I think that's only where we should start. I think there's a lot more to go past awareness, and it makes me laugh a little bit because there's so many angles on mental health that and so many perspectives on mental health that we all take. And me coming from the perspective of the clinical setting of mental health, it's clearly different than what you would normally have if you were out on the street or if you were in a common place in public. People view mental health differently out there. We also want to be very sensitive because mental health might be closer to home than we think. Mental health might be in the home. It might even be in us, right? So now, awareness is good, but how do we step that further? And as a joke, I just kind of try to play off some other words. And you might have seen a post or something on Instagram. I don't know if I was planning this kind of idea. I don't even know if I'm going to, but we'll see. But instead of mental health awareness, there's a whole spectrum of different ways and different perspectives and biases towards mental health. So there's mental health Despair-ness. Instead of awareness, I'm kind of using that as a foundation to kind of see the different perspectives that we have. So some people that have been affected by mental health are in despair about it. And that is not wrong, and it's not something to look down upon. When someone's going through something that affects their mental health and they're in a depressed state or they're in a very stressful, frustrated state, you can't help but be in this place of despair, right? And I would consider that probably the lowest part of the spectrum. Lowest not in a sense of entitlement, but lowest in a sense of difficulty. So if you think of mental health and you think of despair, what's dangerous is things can happen. Bad decisions could be made if you're in that place of despair. So yeah, if you are kind of in a dark place with mental health, and then here's Mental Health Awareness Month, being aware is just not enough. I mean, I'm aware that person has mental health issues. What does that do? That doesn't really help them at all. And that's why I have a problem with that. This is the first kind of spoke, or the first kind of prong in the idea of awareness is not enough. Because I've seen people be in the lowest of lows in life to the point where they didn't want to have family visitors because they were so ashamed and embarrassed about what they're going through. Another prong that we have is mental health unfairness. Mental health unfairness is kind of this next idea that I came up with, because the people that are dealing with mental health, there are few that have this anger or resentment towards it. Not just towards mental health, but towards God or the creator or the universe or life circumstances, like life in general, the world. They have this resentment because they were unfairly treated, because they have this disability compared to other people. And this is a hard thing to wrestle with, because when we think of life as being fair or unfair, it's because we're looking so far outward and we're looking at everybody else. And this is arguably for anybody with a disability. Why was I born like this? Why do I have this problem? Or why did that person do this to me? And that's very dangerous, because now you direct your pain and anger towards specific people or specific things in this world. And when you kind of live in that state, it's very dangerous, because there's this pent-up aggression that can be channeled into a negative action. And a lot of my patients that would come in would mention the word unfair. They would say, it's not fair that I have to deal with this and everybody else in the world is completely fine. One thing that I want us to be aware of is we are all dealing with it. We are all dealing with some type of mental health issue. And it's up to us to wrestle with it, to dissect it ourselves and figure out how we can best live this life. And I think for that part of the spectrum of thinking that it's unfair, we need to stop looking outward. We need to stop judging ourselves based on the standards of other people or comparing to the lives of other people. The next part is mental health Beware-ness. And these are the people that don't really understand much about mental health, and it's one of those things that we brush under the rug at home, and we're afraid to address it, or you block people out and you kind of use that as a cop out why you don't want to talk to this person or spend time with that person because they got mental health issues. I don't want to deal with them. Well, let's reconsider a few things there, because this person who does deal with mental health issues, maybe they have a mental health disorder, that doesn't mean that they can't live and they shouldn't be able to have the opportunities and the abilities that everybody else does. And I think this is the one thing that I tell my students every term. And it's ironic that I'm kind of recording this near the end of one of my terms with a couple of groups for the school I work for. And I usually ask them around this time, like, what have they taken away from this mental health rotation? I bring them to a mental health facility, part of a medical hospital. And a lot of them come in with this idea of mental health, of it's scary, it's dangerous, and a lot of them dread going to clinical. I have students come in thinking like, I'm gonna get attacked, I'm gonna die. They have this beware-ness of mental health, and I try to help break that stigma when we bring a group to a facility like that, and I try to change their perspective on mental health. It's good to be weary and to I guess beware of dangers, of course, and arguably the patients and clients that end up going to the hospital are in a very sensitive state of needing stabilization. So there's this element of danger there, of course, but I try to pull students through that fear and kind of open up this idea that mental health is something that we can be aware of, right? And more so know how to care for them, because as a nurse, you're going to care for someone no matter what, even if it's in a specialty that has nothing to do with mental health. You will deal with mental health. If a person just had surgery, on one of their legs, and they're, in med surge, and that's your job as a med surge nurse, psychologically, that patient's going through a lot more than you think. It's not that their limb is recovering. they're dealing with a whole different mental game. And we have to be aware, right? And be understanding of that. That we can't push that side of them away. We can't ignore that part of them because we're scared. Normally at the end of a term like this, I see a lot of growth in my students. Instead of being completely afraid to engage in conversation with patients, they develop this confidence and understanding that this is a person that we need to support. And no matter what, if we don't do it, who's going to do it? Right? So instead of being scared or fearful, instead of having beware-ness of mental health, now that we know, we can acknowledge that we're aware. What do we do with that? Don't be afraid to engage. Don't be afraid to interact, because that ultimately might be one of the things that will help this person. Having a sense of connection back to the world, safely, of course. Now, if we're kind of in the middle of the spectrum here, where we have this understanding and awareness of mental health, and let's say we have mental health issues and we have other people around us that are dealing with mental health issues, and I see it all the time in the hospital where patients are around each other. A lot of people compare their mental health disorders, or they try to top each other. They try to one-up each other. And I call this mental health compare-ness. We're playing a dangerous game here, because the issue with humans is when we have this lack, or we have this situation or circumstance, condition, or even a diagnosed disorder, we tend to look around in a way, not just like, life is unfair, but they compare their disorder and they try to top you. Like, oh, my disorder is worse than yours. Step out of the hospital for a second and think about, your circle of friends, your family, and we all have issues. And when we're going through misery in life and we're going through challenges in life, we can't help but compare. Again, very dangerous. It's not about who has the worst problems. Because at that point, if we're trying to justify, well, my problems are worse than yours, so therefore you should treat me differently. I'm going through more than you, so you should be more understanding. And that's a hard game to play, because as humans, we always want to be protective of our egos. So we can't be comparing mental health issues. We can't be comparing life problems, to the next person, to a friend, to a family. We can't be comparing ourselves to that. I think the level of understanding that everybody's going through something helps us have a little bit more empathy for people. And I think that's the goal. Moving a little bit more, up or to the right of the spectrum, we have people that care very much for mental health. And I call this the mental health Care-ness. And for these people, I think this might be hopefully the next type of step to helping. We're aware that mental health exists. Do we care? Right? So when we talk about Care-ness, it's what can I do? And how can I help? And I think that's what awareness months should be about. It's more than being aware. It's now that we are aware, let's find out how we can help and how we can care for people. There's a lot of people that do care. They do speak out. And it's usually the ones that have been through mental health issues. It's usually the ones that deal with it closer to home, that deal with it in their family, in their friends, or they've made it through, or they've managed it to a point that they're able to function right now. And they develop this altruistic feeling and this, this ability to have empathy to the point where they would know what these people need. And yeah, because I teach mental health, there's obviously strategies that you could do. There's ways to communicate. There's interventions that we could do. But the most important thing that I've seen actually work is to treat people with the same respect, dignity, privacy, and honor that each person deserves. Yes, they might have done some things that they're not happy with, or maybe they've done some dangerous things, things that are hard to explain. But that person, that individual did that for a reason. Not to say that it's okay. Having real empathy is understanding how someone can get to that point. And that helps take away a lot of judgment. So the mental health Care-ness starts with empathy. And we're kind of moving up where now I try to be very weary about, I try to be more aware of is people think that you can fix mental health. You know, I'm in the healthcare field, and in mental health nursing is, and psychiatry in general. We're in this medical business, right? This life-saving business, thinking that we can repair and fix things. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't think we can just repair mental health. I don't think we can just fix it. And there was a time in my career where I felt like, yeah, I'm helping fix people. No. There's people that are dealing with a lot of life issues, and our goal it should not be to repair them, to fix them. I know this is Broken Instruments podcast, but the break isn't complete. It's not broken beyond repair, but repairing this person implies that they're not up to par with life, and they're not, in comparison to everybody else, they're not able to function, right? And the thing about mental health, and I try to get my students to understand this, when they discharge from the hospital, things are not 100% better. They're not fully repaired or fixed. It's the beginning. It's the beginning of rehabilitation and recovery. And now the goal is to prevent any further issues and further difficulties. It's about managing. We might have to live with our problems, our circumstances, our conditions forever. So instead of having the perspective of repairing, let's help each other learn to live with that in mind, with that understanding that, this is probably something I need to be able to manage and maintain forever. And how do I do that? I think us as humans think that we have control over a lot more than we do. And we try to create, we try to solve the problems. There's things out of our control. And I think that was one hard thing that I had to understand, is that I might not be able to fix everything. So while that initially was a good perspective to have, mental health Repair-ness, coming to the understanding that you might not be able to fix everything, that maybe we think we're playing God at some point, that we think we can repair a creation that He made. And that's a dangerous path if you have that perspective. And it brings me to there's one more last one, and I say this because I feel like this is where we're at as a society and a community now, where mental health is kind of glorified, and it's glorified and it's celebrated. And I don't want to say that it shouldn't be, but I think it might be getting a little too far now. And it's mental health Flare-ness. People look at mental health with a lot of celebration, glorification, and I want to be very careful with that. I definitely think that everybody has a right to celebrate everything and celebrate themselves. But are we going a little too far now? Where I use mental health as a badge of honor, and it's a trophy, or a sign of power. I start seeing more and more that people post about mental health, and it's almost used as an excuse to not do well or to do what they want to do, right? And people go, oh, I have this disorder, and and this is why I want to be very careful with that, is because those people that actually do say that, because we're still managing it, because we're still managing our own mental health. Life is about cycles. It's about phases of life, and it continues no matter what. If it's not going to be fixed, we're still going to be dealing with it. And we celebrate it too soon. It's almost like, well, when the next thing happens, when the next situation occurs, how are we going to deal with it? We get to this place of comfort in our lives that we think everything's going to be fine and it's all good and I made it through. And then the life cycle starts over again, and you go through another difficult, hard time in life, and it feels like the world's crumbling again. And I've seen it over and over again in my clients. I've seen a lot of frequent flyers, they would say, at the hospital, where, recurring patients, they would admit maybe monthly, every few months, some every few days. After they discharge, they come back within a couple days. When we start feeling good and we start celebrating ourselves a little too soon, we speak a little too soon, we realize that we might feel good at this moment, but life continues. And the path of life is riddled with challenges. So I'm not saying to not celebrate, the awareness of mental health. I'm not saying to not feel better about yourself. There's an element of that. But at some point, I think we get a little too carried away with celebrating our own accomplishments, that it kind of sets us up for a difficult time to get back to that when the next thing hits. So the flare-ness of mental health, I think we can dim that flare a little bit and be in the reality of it. That no matter how good or how healthy we think we are, we got to be very careful, because there's always another challenge coming. And at the end of it all, we want to win each battle. And, if you celebrate too soon, you celebrate too early, you might think we're all good, and you let down your guard, and then I would say that's how the other side kind of gets us, right? So I think looking past awareness and all the different angles that we look at mental health, the different perspectives, from the Despair-ness to the Unfair-ness, the Beware-ness, Compare-ness, the Care-ness, Repair-ness, and Flare-ness, I think it's important to ask ourselves where we lie on that spectrum, what our perspective is on mental health. So we're aware that it exists. Cool. Are you aware of your biases towards mental health? And again, our biases are not wrong. We just have to be aware of them. That if I've dealt with mental health personally, if I've dealt with mental health in my circle, if I deal with mental health at work, or if I have no dealings with mental health, only if I'm on the street and I see someone walking on the street talking to themselves, or they're at the store talking to, the cereal boxes. If that's the only experience you have with mental health, that's your perspective on it. How do we help then? What can I do to adjust the way I approach mental health? And a lot of the times it starts with ourselves. Being aware of your biases would be the next step. And then from there, because of my biases, how do I come off to other people? And what can I do to help that? so that I don't come off the wrong way. I might have brought up a few things that might have, poked you a little bit, or maybe ruffled some feathers. It's not my intention to offend anybody. Mental health awareness is good, but I think if we really want to help, it's not enough at that point. All right. The question is, where do we go from here? How can I help? How can I help the people around me? If I have someone close to me that is dealing with mental health issues, what's the best way? And I think that's something I wanted to tackle with Broken Instruments podcast. Ironically, it was the original name of this podcast was supposed to be Mental Hygiene Podcast. The Mental Hygiene Podcast was going to be about maintenance of good mental health. I realized that that's just one side of the ideas that I want to tackle. Mental health is one corner of the room. And when I go back and forth about what Broken Instruments podcast is, it's about all angles of life. There's the physical side, there's the mental side, then there's the emotional side, which is stemming off of mental health, the emotional wellness and spiritual, right? And I think it's important to note that, like the idea of being whole and having a holistic life and a holistic approach to life, again, is the cycles. And if you strengthen certain areas of that foundation, or you notice a weakness in one area, let's focus on that. Because maybe you're physically good, you're physically healthy. Maybe you're emotionally stable, emotionally intelligent, well. But, mentally and spiritually, we can kind of strengthen those pillars in our lives. Well, now's the time that we can start looking into a little bit further how we can strengthen those pillars and figure out how we can build a stronger foundation. And again, not just for us, but for the people that need us, for our families, for our children. It's about being, it's not even just being balanced. It's about being dynamic in a sense of when different weather hits us, whether it's the winds, are we able to stand tall still? Or if it's the rain, are we able to be, weatherproof? Are we able to be rainproof or rain resistant? Like we can build a strong foundation out of wood, but what happens when the rain hits and that wood starts to morph? So we have to be ready for all situations. And that to me is being dynamic. And a lot of my goals in life now are to figure out how we can define that, how we can define what it is to live a dynamic life, that no matter what shifts us, we're able to adjust things in our life and to be resolute on that path. You might have seen some posts about Carreon dynamic, and I'm not advertising it or anything right now, but definitely it's all that's coming out of me now. And a lot of these things that I'm talking about are going to be ingrained in one of my programs for men, and it's called the Resolute Man program. And it's about being the most well-rounded people that we could be, and men in particular, because I am a man, and it's about a lot of life circumstances that I had to deal with and understandings I had to come up with, and I'm still learning. So yeah, certain courses like that, the Resolute Man program, I have the emotional resilience course, dynamic communication, and the dynamic action plan. These are things that I'm kind of lining up for the future. And if you're interested in something like that, follow Carreon Dynamic on Instagram. And I'll have some posts about stuff like this, about being better people. I'll have some posts about it. I'll have some offers there. So I just want you to be aware that's kind of a place where I'll drop some information on courses and things like that. yeah, this is more not even a side project. I feel like it's just part of me that is aching to come out. And it's up to anybody else if they want a resource like that. Just know that there's one there. It's all about being the better version every day, the best version that you can be every day. And it's about being dynamic, being able to adjust to the different life circumstances, and to be strong and healthy and resolute on your path. And so that's my little rant on mental health and everything. We need to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others. And that's basically the foundation of how I try to approach life, that we're all in this together and we're all figuring this life out. And yeah, we're still dealing with different storms every day, and it never stops. So if there's anything that I hope you get from this, it's take care of yourself. Be aware. Be aware of your own mental health. Be aware of your own biases. And I think that might help us interact with each other a little bit better. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening.